Good to have you with us. Hope you had a happy holiday weekend. We do want to begin with the surge of the Omicron coronavirus variant as cases surged to the highest point in nearly a year. In the past week, while Americans started gathering for the holidays, we had days when more than 200,000 people tested positive. Now, the last time we saw numbers that high was in January 2021. Like the case numbers, the demand for testing is also reaching new heights. Thousands of Americans fresh off holiday celebrations are now waiting in line or hunting for tests to see if they're infected. Adding to the holiday stress, getting home is becoming a nightmare for thousands of travelers. Just in the past few days, thousands of flights nationwide have been canceled because flight crews are testing positive for the virus. This comes as the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, warns people not to become complacent with Omicron, even if the cases are mild. That's because more people are being admitted to the hospital with COVID, an average of nearly 8,000 people every day. We have a team breaking down every angle of the Omicron surge, from testing to travel, and what doctors are learning about this new variant. Let's begin with NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber in New York City and NBC reporter Gary Grumbach in New Jersey, two of the hardest hit states right now. Ellison, New York State reported its highest new case total ever on Christmas Eve. More than 49,000 people testing positive in that 24-hour period. So what is the situation with Omicron in the city right now? How are they meeting the demand for testing?
Hey, Joe, yeah, cases continue to rise, and it seems like that they are not going to be dropping in the near future. New York's positivity rate right now is 14%. But when you look at hospitalizations and death, it is nowhere near the numbers that New York saw during peaks pre-vaccine. The governor in this state is trying to remind people to focus on those numbers. Listen.
As we knew the numbers would continue to climb, we foresaw this. This is not a surprise, and this is a very, very contagious variant. And I will repeat this once again. This is not the same situation we had in March of 2020 or even last winter's surge.
When it comes to testing, that's been a bit of a mess, to say the least, in New York City. We have seen lines that go for blocks and blocks, people waiting in the cold, sometimes for hours, just to get a COVID test. When it comes to the over-the-counter at-home rapid kits that are typically available at pharmacies or grocery stores in the city, those seem to leave the shelves as soon as they are restocked. So to try and help with some of that, the state is opening pop-up vaccine sites inside of subways. Two of those, one here in Times Square and another at Grand Central, open today. 5 additional pop-up sites at subways. Those are set to open next week. Joe?
Something tells me the demand for testing going to be just as great in this week following all those holiday gatherings. Let's go across the river to New Jersey, where you are, Gary. New Jersey seeing a 163% increase in cases just over the past 2 weeks. So what's the state doing in response to their surge?
Hey there, Joe. Yeah, we've seen thousands and tens of thousands of cases here in New Jersey. More cases this weekend than we saw throughout the entire pandemic in terms of a daily average. And usually when we see cases rising, we're seeing hospitalizations rising as well. And we are seeing that in the state of New Jersey, but not nearly at the rate of last December. We're seeing about 2,500 people hospitalized in the state of New Jersey. Most of them are unvaccinated. Hospitals say they have surge plans ready if they need them. They don't need them right now. Governor Murphy has made himself very clear. He does not want the state to go back into another lockdown like we saw during the spring of 2020. So as a result of that, localities and local communities are really taking matters into their own hands. The city of Newark is instituting a vaccine mandate for restaurants, bars, and entertainment and sporting venues across the city. The cities of Montclair and South Orange are instituting indoor mask mandates as well. And Governor Murphy, of course, is involved with this every step of the way. Today, he'll be on a phone call with President Biden about how COVID is handling, and all the governors are handling COVID from state to state. But he'll be taking that call from Costa Rica, where he's on vacation with his family. Joe?
All right, Ellison, vaccines are a huge part of this. New vaccine mandates now go into effect for New York City today. What are these new rules? How are they going to work?
So one mandate expands the existing vaccine vaccine mandate to private companies. So what does that mean? Any non-governmental entity who employs at least one worker in New York City will now be required to obtain proof of vaccination from their employees starting today. If they fail to do that, they could face fines starting at $1,000. Another mandate going into effect today in New York City has to do with kids. In New York City now, anyone over the age of 12, they are required to show proof of vaccination to dine indoors, go to a gym, or any indoor entertainment venue. That mandate having to do with children is highly controversial. Mayor Bill de Blasio says that both of these are bold, first-in-the-nation measures and necessary to keep New Yorkers and their communities safe. But Mayor Bill de Blasio only has a few more days left in office. The incoming mayor, Mayor-elect Eric Adams, has said that he is weighing in and he is going to review, these mandates as his administration comes in. Mayor Bill de Blasio's administration, his legal team, they have said they expect legal challenges to this, but they believe that it will hold up in court. Mayor Bill de Blasio switches out, leaves office. The new mayor comes in on January 1st. Joe?
Ellison mentioned kids. Gary, let's stick with the kids theme here. School districts now figuring out what to do once students return in January. Quickly here, how are school leaders in Jersey handling this?
Yeah, Governor Murphy has said he does not want everyone to go back to all virtual learning. He says it's not good for the students, it's not good for the teachers, it's not good for the parents, it's not good for anybody. So it's really being done on a case-by-case basis. Some schools, what they're doing is starting virtual for the first few weeks of January once kids get back from their holiday break, just to get until the spike sort of subsides here. And then they hope to be going back into all in-person learning. But other schools are instituting vaccine mandates, booster mandates, just so people are a little bit more safer in the classroom. But right now, school administrators are just crossing their fingers they can get back in person in the spring semester.
A lot of parents are doing the same. Ellison, Gary, thanks for kicking us off this morning. Let's bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. Dr. Patel, good to have you with us. You know, so many families had to change their plans this past weekend and last week because of positive COVID cases. Remind us, what makes Omicron so contagious, especially compared with previous strains?
Yeah, Joe, good morning. Briefly, Omicron is able to replicate faster, and that means that you're able to give it to more people. And we do believe that the mutations, a number of mutations, over 30 of them, allow for that spike protein to attach in a much more efficient manner to the linings of your upper respiratory tract.
Okay, so despite evidence that shows Omicron has milder symptoms, Dr. Fauci is still warning that doesn't mean we can let our guard down, especially those who are unvaccinated. Here's more of what he said.
Those are the most vulnerable ones when you have a virus that is extraordinarily effective in getting to people and infecting them the way Omicron is. So even though we're pleased by the evidence from multiple countries that it looks like there is a lesser degree of severity, we've got to be careful that we don't get complacent about that.
If Omicron cases are mild for most of the vaccinated and boosted folks, do we have an idea yet of what the variant looks like for those who are unvaccinated?
Yeah, Joe, it really does present a bit differently than previous strains. It causes what we call a bronchitis. It's not that deep settling pneumonia. People on the ventilators feeling that shortness of breath. They're really having cough, and a productive cough where it just kind of gets you tired. And a lot of us have experienced that. But with Omicron, it's more pronounced. And in an unvaccinated person, it can cause them to not only need to be hospitalized, but Joe, it can be deadly. And I want to remind people, even in vaccinated individuals, if you have chronic conditions, that can also make you more susceptible.
Dr. Patel, we just heard from Gary talking about how schools are responding to Omicron. Right now, do you think it's safe for kids to return to the classroom in January? If so, what are the steps that schools should take?
I do think it's safe, providing a couple of conditions. Number one, that there is some mechanism to make sure that students have some ability to get tested, because we know it can spread quickly, fast, and it can be asymptomatic. Number two, a way to make sure that any eligible adults or children are vaccinated. That's going to ensure everyone around, even in households, Joe, are safe. Number three, air filtration and masking. I know that we're tired of it, but masks can especially make a difference with Omicron, because it can take just days to infect a number of people, as we've been seeing over the Christmas holidays.
Dr. Kavita Patel, good to see you on this Monday morning. Thank you so much. Now, this morning, the surge in coronavirus cases is creating a travel nightmare across the country. More than 1,000 flights were canceled over the holiday weekend. Airlines cited staffing shortages from employees exposed to or infected with COVID. And for many flyers, relief could still be days away. NBC News correspondent Kerry Sanders explains.
Well, good morning. If you're flying today, expect delays. The day after Christmas, we had more than 1,000 flights delayed or canceled. Now, all this is related to the fact that employees of airlines are getting tested for coronavirus, and they're getting positive results. So there are fewer employees, which is impacting the flight crews, the ground crews, meaning that some flights just have to be canceled. Now, the airlines have requested the CDC to recalculate its recommended time in quarantine. Right now, employees need to be quarantined for 10 days, but that's having a compounding effect on the airline schedules. And of course, we're back to levels where people are traveling significantly. So if you're traveling today, we're beginning to see the numbers climb already with the delays and the cancellation. So a couple pieces of advice. First of all, make sure you call the airline before you go to the airport to see what's going on with your flight, and then check again online before you leave wherever you are to go to the airport to see if maybe things have changed again. And then finally, expect that there will be a delay and you may be stuck where you are. If you can work from home or work from wherever you are, that's good. But if you're trying to rush back today to get to work, it's a good chance you may have to call your boss and say, not going to happen. Back to you.
Gary, thank you so much. Now, for more on these flight cancellations, let's bring in Melanie Lieberman, senior editor at The Points Guy. Melanie, good morning. You know, we just heard from Kerry there. There's going to be more delays and cancellations for flights today. He offered a few tips. What would you tell Americans who are preparing to fly either this morning or even later on this week?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that travelers need to keep in mind is that patience and flexibility have never been more important because there is so much uncertainty. We are still seeing cancellations, delays, and these things tend to have a trickle-down effect. So when we have early on cancellations, that's going to continue in the hours and the days to come. So the most important thing is to be proactive. If you have somewhere to go, you should already be looking at what your alternative options are just in case your trip is disrupted. That's really the single best thing a traveler can do right now.
So, Melanie, what advice do you have for people who are currently stuck at an airport? NBC News now does air at several airports. They're waiting for a new flight. Is there any way they can maximize the compensation they get from their airline because of these delays?
Absolutely. Travelers who have their flights canceled are entitled to a refund. You should absolutely push for that. Having a travel voucher is not as good as having a full refund in the form of your original payment. So absolutely hold your ground when it comes to getting a full refund. If you are currently at the airport, your flight is canceled or delayed, and you're trying to figure out what to do next, the best thing to do is to be looking at what your options are for other flights. Ask the airline if they will work with you to help get you on the next flight, even if it's with a different airline. It never hurts to ask. Travelers can also be thinking about whether or not they want to be accommodated at a hotel or have other forms of compensation wrapped up in that. So the best thing to do is to understand what you want. And of course, go through that with patience and kindness, because everybody is working to get home as fast as possible. But knowing exactly what you want, what your ideal scenario is in terms of being compensated or rebooked is important.
Kindness, always important, even though it can be frustrating. Melanie, do you have any advice for travel alternatives in case these flight cancellations continue? Someone says, hey, I can't wait days, and that's how long it's going to take. Are there other ways that people can get around?
Absolutely. Depending on where you're located, taking a train is certainly a great option if your flight is severely delayed or has been canceled, particularly, again, because getting rebooked could take a while. So we want travelers to be thinking about, can I rent a car and get where I need to go? Can I hop on a train? Can I fly into a different area airport and take a train from there or a car from there? So these are all solutions travelers should be thinking about if their plans have been upended by this spate of cancellations and delays we're seeing.
Good to know there are options during these tough times. Melanie Lieberman with The Points Guy, thanks so much for your advice. We appreciate it. In other news, the juries in two big trials will resume deliberations this morning after struggling to reach verdicts before the holiday break. In New York, GHISLAINE Maxwell is facing 6 federal charges, including sex trafficking of a minor. Well, in San Jose, California, Elizabeth Holmes, founder of Theranos, is facing 9 counts of wire fraud. We're covering the latest in both very different trials with NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos and senior business reporter Ben Popkin. Good morning to both of you. Danny, let's start with you and the Maxwell trial. Before the jury was sent home on Wednesday, before the holiday break, jurors did request transcripts of some of the testimony that they had heard. What testimony did they request, and does that suggest anything to you about the deliberations?
It's a good sign that jurors are requesting transcripts because it means they're poring over the scripts to find out whether or not there's inconsistent testimony. If somebody is saying something that just doesn't sit right with them. And the jurors are instructed, if you find someone to be not credible on one point, you can conclude that they're not credible at all on all points. So this is a good sign, generally speaking, in deliberations, that jurors are taking their job seriously and not just wandering back into the jury room and saying, did we believe her or him, or did we not?
Ben, let's bring you in here. You've been following the Elizabeth Holmes trial very closely. On Thursday, the last day of deliberations before their break, the jury asked to hear some audio again of Holmes on a call with investors. Tell us about that piece of evidence, why it's so important for this case.
Good morning, Joe. The trial of the failed former blood testing startup founder really hinges on intent to benefit herself. Did Holmes make statements to investors that she knew to be false? So this secret recording made by investors who are frustrated about getting financial info from Holmes provides a clear window into the past. They heard 10 clips from a 2013 recording she made on a call with investors as she made lofty claims about the company's capabilities and fundraising, claiming the company would scale, giving investors multiple returns. She said it could run any lab test on a drop of blood, even though the machines were so buggy they could never do more than a dozen and had to do vain arm draws on other companies' machines. And she spoke about the work the company was doing with the military, even though it was never deployed. So we've heard from 29 witnesses, seen emails, PowerPoints, text messages, seen her quotes and articles. But this is Holmes speaking unguardedly, making those allegedly misleading statements in real time. It's a powerful piece of evidence. Here's her making those statements. But you can also argue in some of those cases, if you analyze the words, she's walking right up to that line of deception. So it could really cut for both either the prosecution or defense in the jury's minds. We'll be watching.
Danny, clearly these are two very different trials, but in both cases, something in common. The juries appear to be having difficulty reaching verdicts. As a defense attorney, what are your thoughts now that we're days into deliberations on both?
Not only are these unusual for that reason, these are unusual because we have 2 female defendants and a third in the form of Kim Potter just last week. This is pretty rare in the criminal justice system, and you have defendants in several cases who took the stand and testified. So we're not likely to see trials like this again in the future. But sometimes juries have difficulty deliberating. Even the most complex cases, though, really only take, generally speaking, a couple days. So is this a sign of a possible deadlock? I don't think we're quite there yet. If it looks like that's possible, the judge will give what's called an Allen charge that basically tells them, you're no better than any other jury. Get back in there and reach a verdict. Defense attorneys like me don't like the Allen charge because we believe, generally speaking, that it forces holdout jurors to say, well, I was for acquittal. I guess I'll give in to the majority. Now, that, of course, is just part of the astrology of us on the outside trying to figure out what's going on in the inside of jury deliberation.
Ben, as the Holmes trial picks back up for week 2 of deliberations, what should we be looking out for?
Well, the jury has been deliberating for 22 hours. They've had 3 months of technical testimony to go through. They've been extremely hard to read during the trial. They didn't show emotion, physical reactions, but they were extremely attentive, alert, taking notes. This investor call that we mentioned earlier, that was the second request from the jury. The first was whether they could take the jury instructions home to review them. The answer was no. So until we have a verdict, we'll be watching this attentive, detail-oriented jury, see if there's any more jury questions that give an insight into their process. In the meantime, we'll be left to try to decipher Holmes's body language in the courtroom as she reacts to these jury instructions. When she listened to the audio of herself making those claims in that investor call, she was blinking a lot and glancing at the jury. Make of that what you will. And until then, we're all just waiting for a verdict.
Ben Popkin, Danny Savalas, we know you'll be keeping close eyes on these today and perhaps throughout this week. Thanks so much. The Texas lawyer who argued and won the landmark Roe v. Wade abortion rights case before the Supreme Court has died. Sarah Weddington was just 26 years old when she first challenged the Texas abortion law in the Supreme Court before it was ultimately overturned in 1973. She went on to serve as a Texas state lawmaker, reforming sexual abuse laws and helping provide protections for rape victims. She also served as an advisor on women's issues to former President Jimmy Carter. Weddington was 76 years old. Let's get a check now on your morning news now weather. And a powerful storm brought a white Christmas, at least out west. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us with more on that. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Yeah, very white Christmas. Some spots saw 10 feet of snow. We're going to tack on about 3 more feet of snow. So let's take a look at that snow in the Sierras because you know what? It was rough. They had a lot of snow over the past 48 hours. And again, we were measuring it in feet. It made for very difficult travel and will continue to make for very difficult travel over the next several days. All right, let's take a look at the alerts that are in place because they're stretched pretty much all over the west into the northern plains and even into the northeast. We're seeing some winter alerts this morning, but in the west, we're seeing some pinks and blues and whites, and that's indicating some heavier snow is possible in your warning areas. 43 million people impacted today and tomorrow by this. The northern plains, you see some winter storm warnings as well, and then the northeast, we could see a mixture of rain and snow in some spots. Here is the setup in the west. We're going to see that wet pattern continuing. It's a relentless pattern, storm after storm after storm. So again, heavy snow today in the Sierras, difficult and impossible to travel. We saw that video just a second ago, and we could tack on 3 feet of snow in some spots. That's where you see that pink coloring. That's the highest mountains, elevations of the mountains. Northern plains also, we're looking at some snow, lighter compared to the west, but we could see a half a foot of snow in some spots as we head towards Tuesday. Now, this is a big story, too. We have extremes. We have summer-like weather in the southern and plains in the southeast, and then frigid weather in the northern plains. So while in Dallas today, it's going to be 78 degrees, 23 degrees above normal, 75 in Memphis. And then Cody, we're looking at 14 degrees, Bismarck just 8 degrees. And by tomorrow, we're going to keep this pattern in place. So still really warm with temperatures in the 70s, and then just feels like 3 below in parts of the northern plains. And this will continue into the late week. So 6 degrees in Minneapolis on Wednesday and temperatures in the teens Thursday and Friday. Joe?
Wow, those are some big extremes. All right, Michelle, thanks so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.